Hey, everyone. I bet you're the type who likes to, stay ahead of the curve,
Hmm.
see what's coming, right? The big stuff that could really shake things up.
The stuff that matters.
Exactly. Well, that's what today's deep dive is all about.
That's right.
We're going straight to the source, the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report, 2025.
And what I find really impressive about this report is, it's not just one think tank's take on things.
Right.
It's based on insights from like over 900 global experts,
Wow.
people who are actually out there in all sorts of fields.
Yeah, like a massive brain trust.
Yeah, exactly. A
Exactly.
massive brainstorming session about the future.
And our mission today is to pull out the most important points, the things you really need to know.
Yeah, and break it down.
Absolutely. So they've done this clever thing in the report where they analyze these risks on two different timelines.
Yeah, they do 2 years out and then 10 years out.
Okay.
It gives us a clear picture of how these threats could evolve.
Right, like short-term versus long-term.
Exactly, yeah, and what we need to prepare for.
So let's start with the here and now.
Okay.
What are the biggest short-term risks for 2025? I have a feeling some of these might sound familiar.
You're probably right. The report puts extreme weather like right at the top.
Yeah, we're seeing that already.
It's happening. Floods, droughts, the heat waves,
Yeah.
those kinds of things that can, really disrupt supply chains, cause massive economic damage, and displace entire communities. And then
Scary.
it is scary. And then there's this whole other category of what they call critical changes to Earth systems.
Okay, now that sounds ominous.
It does, right?
What does that even mean?
Think of it like pushing a system to its breaking point.
Uh-huh.
We're kind of doing that with deforestation, pollution, climate change, of course.
Right, we're pushing it too far.
Yeah, we're pushing it too far, and we could trigger irreversible changes. Things like the collapse of ecosystems or the melting of polar ice caps.
That's the short term.
That's just the short term.
Great. So basically, we're talking about a whole lot of interconnected issues all coming to a head.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, the report also points to resource shortages, misinformation spreading like wildfire.
It really is.
It is. And even the potential downsides of artificial intelligence becoming more sophisticated.
Okay, so it really is like this perfect storm of global anxieties.
It is.
And you're telling me it gets even worse in the long term.
Unfortunately, yes. A lot of those same risks just intensify over the next decade. But what's really surprising is that the report predicts that environmental risks will become even more severe long-term than, like, societal issues.
Wait, so you're saying that things like political instability, cyber warfare, conflict, those are all still major concerns,
Major concerns.
but somehow less worrisome than the environmental stuff a decade from now?
Yeah, kind of blows your mind, right?
It does. Why is that?
That is a great question, and one that the report doesn't really answer directly. But it does suggest that the longer we wait to address environmental issues, the harder and more disruptive the solutions will become.
Right, it's like we're kicking the can down the road
It is.
until it's not a can anymore, it's a boulder.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have this backdrop of, like, all these intensifying global risks.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had to pick one that's, like, keeping experts up at night right now, what would it be?
They are very clear on this. The number one concern for 2025 is state-based armed conflict.
Oh, wow.
It's actually jumped up in the rankings.
Significantly.
Yes, since the last report.
I can see why, with the war in Ukraine, ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, and just tensions rising, everywhere.
Everywhere.
It feels like we're on a nice hedge.
It does, yeah. And the report explicitly connects this heightened risk to those events,
Yeah.
They even use this chilling term,
No.
geopolitical recession, to describe this era marked by increasing conflict, but
Yeah.
weak international cooperation to address it.
So instead of, like, working together to solve problems, we're all retreating into our own corners and just letting those tensions fester.
Yeah, and what does that mean for, the average person?
Right, exactly.
Well, think about it. If countries are focused on conflict and security threats, they're less likely to collaborate on things like trade, climate change,
Right.
or, global health initiatives.
It affects everything.
It creates a ripple effect that touches every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, so it's not just about, like, some far-off war.
Right.
It's about how it impacts everything else.
Yeah, it impacts our daily lives.
So what are the potential flashpoints they're most worried about? Like, where could things really boil over?
They outline 3 main escalation pathways.
Okay.
First, there's the possibility of further conflict involving Russia and Ukraine,
Right, of course.
potentially drawing in neighboring countries or even leading to a wider war. And then there's the situation in the Middle East, with tensions between Iran and Israel constantly threatening to erupt into, a full-blown conflict.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the situation with Taiwan is also a major concern.
Absolutely. The report suggests that any miscalculation or provocation in that region
Yeah.
could quickly escalate into a conflict with global consequences.
It's a lot to take in, but I'm curious, even if those specific conflicts don't explode, is there anything else that has experts worried in this area?
Yes, even if we avoid those worst-case scenarios, the report highlights a worrying trend: the decline of UN peacekeeping efforts,
Okay.
coupled with a rise in global military spending.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a recipe for instability and conflict.
So it's not just about the big wars, but it's about the erosion of the mechanisms that we have to prevent them.
Exactly.
That's scary.
It is, and the report doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
They also point to the worsening humanitarian crises around the world
Right.
and how that can lead to, a sense of apathy
Yeah.
and desensitization to suffering elsewhere.
Yeah, it's like we become numb to it.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered state-based conflict, but I know the report also dives deep into the economic side of things.
Yes.
Specifically, something called geoeconomic confrontation.
Yes.
What is that?
Think of it like a trade war on steroids.
Oh, wow.
Countries using economic tools like sanctions, tariffs, investment restrictions to kind of gain an advantage over their rivals.
So it's not just about bombs and bullets anymore. It's about economics as a weapon.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And the report really highlights how damaging this kind of economic warfare can be.
Yeah, but give me an example. How would this actually play out in the real world?
Well, imagine, a scenario where the U.S. and China get into a full-blown trade war.
Okay.
We're talking tariffs on everything from smartphones to soybeans, restrictions on investments and technology transfers, and just a general breakdown of economic cooperation.
Okay, but how would that affect, me?
Yeah.
How would that affect my day-to-day life?
Well, for starters, the price of, your favorite electronics
Right.
could go up significantly.
Yeah.
You might have less choice in the products you buy. Certain industries could suffer job losses.
So it's not just some abstract, economic concept. This could really hit people where it hurts.
Absolutely. It hits people right in their wallets.
Wow.
Yeah, and the ripple effects go way beyond just trade. This kind of geoeconomic confrontation erodes trust between countries, making it harder to cooperate on crucial things,
Yeah.
like climate change,
Right.
global health, cybersecurity.
This is like this chain reaction of negative consequences.
It is. It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, and the report says this kind of economic warfare is already on the rise.
It is. They highlight a pretty startling statistic. Harmful trade interventions have tripled since 2017.
Wow.
Yeah. So this isn't some far-off future threat. It's happening now.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
Okay, but before we get too deep into the economic weeds, I know there's another topic that's closely tied to all this.
Yes.
The rise of misinformation and surveillance technologies.
Yeah, it's like this double-edged sword of the digital age.
Right.
Technology has this potential to connect us, to empower us,
Of course.
but it also creates opportunities for manipulation and control.
It's true. It feels like we're just bombarded with information from all sides these days.
All of the time.
It's hard to know what to believe, who to trust.
Absolutely. And the report really digs into how this flood of information online is making it even harder to discern truth from fiction.
Yeah.
It's like we're drowning in the sea of misinformation.
Yeah, it really is.
It is.
And I imagine social media and those algorithms that seem to know us better than we know ourselves are like a big part of that.
Oh, they're a huge factor. It's
Yeah.
not just about people deliberately spreading lies. It's also about how these platforms can amplify biased narratives
Right.
and create those echo chambers where people only see information that confirms, their existing beliefs.
So technology is kind of hacking our minds, making us more susceptible to manipulation.
In a way, yeah. And the report points out that AI is making this problem even worse.
Oh, how so?
AI-generated content is getting so sophisticated that it's becoming really hard to distinguish between what's real and what's fake.
It's scary. It's like we're losing our grip on reality.
Yeah, we are. And
Yeah.
then there's this other side of the coin, the rise of surveillance technologies.
Right, right.
Now, these technologies can be used for good, right? Think crime prevention, improving public services.
Of course.
Yeah,
But there's always a but, right?
there's always a but. The report warns about the potential for misuse, especially if we don't have strong legal guardrails and transparency measures in place.
So governments and corporations could use these technologies to, monitor citizens,
Exactly.
censor dissenting voices, control information.
That's right.
It's like a slippery slope towards, a surveillance state where Big Brother's always watching.
That's the concern, yeah. And the report highlights how this erosion of privacy and freedom can have a chilling effect on democracy and free speech.
Okay, so we've got this, perfect storm of misinformation and surveillance swirling around us.
We do.
What can we do about it? Is there any hope?
There's always hope. The report suggests several things, like investing in digital literacy programs
Okay.
to help people critically evaluate information online
Right.
and, recognize those manipulation tactics.
So it's about empowering people to be more discerning consumers of information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And demanding greater transparency and accountability from, social media platforms and governments.
Yeah.
We need to know how these technologies are being used and who's controlling the information we see.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already, but I know there's one more kind of mind-bending topic we need to tackle. The future of biotechnology.
Yeah, that's a big one.
There's this stuff that makes you feel like you're living in a science fiction movie.
It does. We're talking gene editing, synthetic biology, brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah.
Technologies that really have the potential to transform healthcare, agriculture, and even, what it means to be human.
I can already feel my brain starting to melt.
I know, right?
This is amazing, but also a little bit terrifying.
It is a little terrifying. And the report doesn't shy away from the potential dangers. They talk about the possibility of a new generation of bioweapons.
Oh, wow.
Accidental pandemics caused by, genetically engineered organisms. And even, the ethical nightmares of human genome editing.
Okay, now you're just trying to scare me. Right. Give me a concrete example. How could this actually play out in the real world?
Well, the report highlights the increasing ease with which, bad actors could modify or create new biological agents.
Okay.
Imagine a scenario where a terrorist group gets its hands on gene editing technology
Right.
and engineers a deadly virus that's resistant to all known vaccines.
Okay, it's definitely nightmare material.
It is. And it's not just about bioweapons. There's also the whole ethical debate around gene editing and what it means for humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
They highlight the really thorny questions we need to grapple with as these technologies become more powerful.
Yeah, where do we draw the line when it comes to gene editing?
Exactly.
What's acceptable? What's not? Is it okay to, edit genes to prevent diseases? What about enhancing traits? What about, those unintended consequences that we might not even be able to foresee?
It's a can of worms.
It is. It's like opening Pandora's box.
It is. It really is. We need to proceed with caution and have a really robust ethical framework in place to guide our decisions.
Well said.
Yeah.
And speaking of big ethical questions, let's circle back to another major trend we touched on earlier. The rise of super-aging societies.
Yeah, that's often overlooked.
It is, but it's huge.
It's huge. This is something that has the potential to reshape our world in some pretty profound ways.
Absolutely. We're talking about countries where, over 20% of the population is over 65.
Over 65, yeah.
Several nations are already there, and many more are on track to reach that point by 2035.
That's right.
And what does that mean for those societies? What are the challenges?
The report highlights a whole range of issues, from looming pension crises
Yeah, of course.
to strained healthcare systems, to labor shortages, and even shifting social dynamics.
So it's not just about, taking care of grandma and grandpa.
Right.
It's about a fundamental shift in the way our societies function.
Exactly.
And the report makes it clear that this is a global trend
It is.
that'll have ripple effects even in countries with younger populations.
Absolutely.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
know.
It's a lot to process, but it's also incredibly important to understand these trends and how they might shape our future.
I agree, and we've really only scratched the surface
Oh,
of
no.
what's in the report.
There's more.
There's so much more to unpack.
Oh, boy. Well, then let's take a deep breath
Okay,
and dive
John.
back in. There's a lot more to explore.
There is.
And I'm sure it's going to get even more fascinating and maybe even a little bit scary as we go deeper.
Let's do it.
Buckle up.
Ready to jump back into those potential flashpoints for conflict we were discussing?
Yeah, let's unpack those a bit further.
Okay.
I'm particularly curious about how the report dives into potential scenarios for each flashpoint.
Okay.
It's like, choose your own adventure for global catastrophe,
Yeah.
which is a little unsettling, but also, fascinating.
It's a page turner.
Yeah. So let's start with Ukraine.
Okay.
What are some of the scenarios they're outlining there?
Well, with Ukraine, the report really emphasizes that, the stance of the new U.S. administration
Right.
will be crucial.
Right.
Will they continue to support Ukraine?
Mm-hmm.
Or will there be pressure for some kind of negotiated settlement?
Right.
Potentially, reducing aid.
Yeah, yeah.
The consequences of either path could be pretty significant.
It's amazing how those choices can have such a ripple effect, not just in Ukraine, but globally.
Globally.
So what are they saying could happen?
Well, we could see further escalation,
Okay.
potentially drawing in NATO countries,
Right.
or a fragile peace agreement that, leaves everyone kind of on edge.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, the immediate consequences.
Mm-hmm.
The report highlights the potential for long-term instability in the region.
Of course, it's not like these conflicts just disappear overnight.
No, they don't.
Even if the fighting stops,
Right.
the scars can last for generations.
They do, yeah.
What about the Middle East? What are the scenarios they're outlining there?
Well, the report suggests that if tensions between Iran and Israel boil over into a full-scale war,
Right.
it would almost inevitably draw in the United States.
Hmm.
And it's easy to see how that could spiral out of control.
Especially given, the U.S. military presence in the region.
Yeah.
Those bases could become targets, which would, further escalate the conflict.
Absolutely. And the report doesn't just focus on the military side.
Okay.
They also highlight the potential for, social unrest,
Yeah.
economic disruption, and humanitarian crises in the region.
And of course, let's not forget about the potential for conflict over Taiwan.
Right.
I remember that being a major concern in the report.
Yeah.
What are the scenarios they're outlining there?
Well, they focus on, the risk of miscalculation or provocation.
Yeah.
Especially given the increasing, military activity in the region.
Right.
Even a small incident could quickly escalate if tensions are high, especially within the context of this geoeconomic rivalry we were discussing.
I can imagine how, a seemingly minor event,
Yeah.
like a military exercise or a political statement,
Right.
could be misinterpreted
Mm-hmm.
and just trigger this chain of events that no one can control.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really underscores the need for, clear communication,
Yes.
diplomacy,
Mhm.
de-escalation strategies.
And those things are
In short supply these days.
They are. Speaking of which, the report also paints a pretty stark picture of what could happen if the U.S. and China engage in a full-blown trade war.
Okay, yeah, we talked about how, trade interventions have tripled since 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they see this trend heading in the next decade?
Well, they outline this scenario where global trade declines pretty sharply
Okay.
as both countries implement, those protectionist measures.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't just be about tariffs.
Or-
We could see restrictions on investments,
Right.
technology transfer, even the movement of people.
So like a full decoupling of the two largest economies in the world.
Yeah, basically.
It's hard to even imagine the consequence of that.
It would be a huge shift
Yeah.
to the global economic order, with ripple effects felt everywhere.
Of course.
The report points out that even countries that aren't directly involved
Right.
in the U.S.-China rivalry would suffer.
Yeah, think about the disruption to global supply chains, the volatility in financial markets, the uncertainty for businesses,
All of it.
investors. It would be a chaotic time.
It would, yeah.
But, the report also suggests that this kind of fracturing could create opportunities for other countries, right?
Yeah, they do.
Very cool.
Well, they highlight the potential for, rising powers like India
Yeah.
or the Gulf states to kind of step into the void left by this fractured world.
Right.
They could offer, alternative models for economic and political cooperation.
Interesting.
Maybe even act as mediators between, the West and the East.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
No.
There's a possibility for a new, more multipolar world to emerge from this.
It's possible.
It almost sounds hopeful,
Yeah.
but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still need to address the immediate challenges of
Yes.
misinformation and the erosion of trust in, information sources,
That's huge.
which the report highlights as a major risk. Yeah, we talked about how, social media and AI are making it harder to distinguish truth from fiction.
Right.
The report calls it a sea of misinformation and disinformation, which I think is a pretty apt description.
It is.
But how does this connect to the bigger picture of global risks?
Well, imagine a world where people can't agree on basic facts.
Yeah.
They're constantly being bombarded with propaganda
Mm-hmm.
and manipulated by algorithms,
Yeah.
It creates this breeding ground for polarization,
Right.
distrust, conflict, both within societies and between nations.
So misinformation isn't just like a nuisance.
No,
It's a threat multiplier
it is.
that exacerbates all the other risks we've been discussing.
Absolutely. And the report highlights how this problem is becoming even more acute
Yeah.
as, as AI-generated content
Right.
gets more sophisticated.
And harder to detect.
Harder to detect. It's like a weaponization of information.
Yeah, it really is.
And we're only beginning to understand the consequences.
So what can we do about it? Is there any way to, fight back against this tide of misinformation?
Well, the report suggests several things,
Right.
like, expanding those upskilling programs for people building and using AI algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can get more people thinking critically
Yeah.
about how these systems work and how to minimize bias, that's a step in the right direction.
So instead of just being, passive consumers of information,
Yeah.
we need to become more informed and discerning,
Absolutely.
right? Like we need to develop a healthy skepticism about everything we see online.
You got it. And the report also emphasizes the need for more funding for digital literacy initiatives.
Okay.
We need to teach people how to navigate this increasingly complex information landscape
Yeah.
and recognize those manipulation tactics.
It's almost like we need a new set of skills for the digital age.
We do.
Not just, for technical proficiency, but for critical thinking and media literacy.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so moving on from the bad stuff online, the misinformation,
Oh, hi.
the report also highlights the growing role of GovTech in public administration.
It does.
Things like, AI, data analytics, digital platforms, they're becoming more integrated into government services.
They are.
Now, this could be a good thing, right?
It could.
If it means more efficient and effective services for citizens,
Right.
who could argue with that?
You're right. There is potential for good.
Yeah.
But the report warns about, the potential for misuse
Right.
if strong legal guardrails and transparency measures aren't in place.
So it's about striking a balance between, leveraging technology for good, but also protecting individual rights and freedoms.
Exactly.
Right. We need to be wary of the slippery slope towards, a surveillance state where governments and corporations
Yeah.
have unfettered access to our data and can use it to control our behavior.
Absolutely. And the report also talks about the need for accountability and transparency when it comes to AI-generated content.
Yeah, like how do we even know who's behind the information we're consuming?
Right, that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
They suggest things like clear labeling of AI-generated content
Right.
and, robust disclosure policies. We need to know when we're interacting with machines
Right.
versus
Sure.
humans.
Especially when it comes to information that could, influence our decisions or shape public opinion.
Exactly.
It's about maintaining a sense of agency in a world where information is increasingly, mediated by algorithms.
It is. It really is.
Okay, you ready to dive back into the world of biotech?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
We were talking about the exciting potential, but also the terrifying risks
Yes.
of gene editing, synthetic biology, all that mind-bending stuff.
Remember those sci-fi scenarios?
Oh, yeah.
The bioweapons, the accidental pandemics,
Yeah.
the ethical dilemmas of playing God with the human genome.
Right.
The report really dives into those possibilities. Okay.
With, a level of detail
Okay, good.
that's both fascinating and, unsettling.
So they're not just throwing out hypothetical warnings.
No, they're not.
They're actually analyzing how these scenarios could play out.
Yes, they are.
Okay, so for example, what are they saying?
Well, for example, they talk about the increasing accessibility of gene editing technology
Yeah.
and the potential for, non-state actors like terrorist groups
Yeah.
to acquire these tools.
That's a terrifying thought. It's not just, nation states we have to worry about anymore.
No, it's not.
It's any group with, enough resources and malicious intent.
Exactly.
What kind of specific scenarios do they outline?
They highlight the possibility of, engineered viruses that are resistant to existing vaccines,
Okay.
the potential for, targeted attacks on specific populations or individuals, and even, the nightmare scenario
The what?
of a global pandemic.
Oh, no. Triggered by you know, an accidental release of a genetically modified organism.
Okay, I need a moment to process all of that.
Yeah,
It's like something out of a dystopian science fiction novel.
it is. But amidst all of these potential horrors, the report also acknowledges
Okay.
the immense potential of biotech for good.
Right.
These technologies
Oh,
could cure diseases,
Yeah.
improve crop yields,
Right.
develop sustainable energy sources, even enhance human capabilities.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
It's not.
It's about finding a way to, like, harness the power of biotech for good
Mm-hmm.
while also mitigating the risks.
It is, and that's the challenge.
That's a big challenge.
A huge challenge.
Yeah.
The report really emphasizes the need for robust ethical frameworks,
Right.
international cooperation, and public engagement
Mm-hmm.
to guide the development and deployment of these technologies.
So we need to have, like, a global conversation about this,
You do.
about where we want to draw the line.
Absolutely.
What's acceptable, what's not.
Yeah,
This is a conversation that needs to happen sooner rather than later
it does.
because these technologies are advancing at an incredible pace.
They are. And let's not forget about, the ethical considerations surrounding gene editing.
Right, right.
The report really gets into the weeds on this,
Okay.
exploring the really thorny questions of what it means to alter the human genome.
It's the whole playing God debate, right?
It is.
Like, where do we draw the line between therapy and enhancement?
Exactly.
Between preventing disease and creating, designer babies?
Mm-hmm.
It's a slippery slope.
It is. It really is.
Yeah, the report doesn't shy away from these questions.
No, they don't.
They highlight the potential for unintended consequences,
Yeah.
the risk of, exacerbating social inequalities,
Mhm.
and these really fundamental ethical questions
Huge questions.
about what it means to be human
Yeah.
in an age of genetic engineering.
It's a lot to think about.
It's enough to make your head spin. And speaking of head-spinning issues, let's circle back to that other major trend we discussed earlier, the rise of super-aging societies.
Right.
We talked about the looming pension crises
Yeah.
and the strain on healthcare systems.
Yeah.
But what about the social and economic impacts of this demographic shift?
Well, the report digs into those as well.
Okay, good.
They highlight the potential for labor shortages,
Of course.
slower economic growth,
Right.
and even social unrest. As
Mm.
the balance between, working age populations and retirees tips further.
So it's not just about taking care of, grandma and grandpa.
No.
It's about a fundamental shift in the way our societies function.
Exactly.
And the report makes it clear that this is a global trend
It is.
that will have ripple effects even in countries with younger populations.
Absolutely.
Wow, we've really gone deep on some pretty heavy topics today.
I know, we have.
It's a lot to digest,
It is.
but it's also incredibly important to understand these trends
Ah,
and how they might shape our future.
I agree. And we've only just begun to scratch the surface of what's in the report.
Really?
There's so much more to unpack, so many potential scenarios to explore.
Well, and let's take a deep breath
Yeah.
and dive back in.
Let's do it.
There's a lot more to explore, and I'm sure it's going to get even more fascinating
It will.
and maybe even a little bit scary
Maybe.
as we go deeper.
All right, buckle up.
Going through this report,
Mm-hmm.
it can feel a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's like
A long one.
one potential crisis after another,
It is.
and each one more complex
Right.
and interconnected than the last.
Absolutely.
But amidst all the doom and gloom,
Mm-hmm.
the report does offer some,
Right.
glimmers of hope.
They do. They do.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay.
Tell me there's a light at the end of this tunnel.
There is. There is.
Okay.
The key message is that,
Yeah.
we have agency.
Yeah.
We're not just passive bystanders in all of this. We can actually take action
Yeah.
to mitigate these risks
Okay.
and shape a more resilient future.
I like that message. What kind of actions?
Okay, what are they talking
about?
They emphasize, first and foremost, the
Right.
importance of strengthening those multilateral institutions.
So like what?
Think,
What?
the United Nations,
Okay.
the World Trade Organization,
Right.
and the international agreements on climate change.
So basically, more global cooperation,
More cooperate.
less going it alone.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that a lot of these challenges, they transcend national borders.
They do.
And we need to work together if we're going to address them
But
effectively.
absolutely, yeah.
It makes sense, but it also feels like we're moving in the opposite direction these days.
It does feel that way.
With rising nationalism,
Yeah.
geopolitical tensions.
Yeah, it's tough.
Is there any realistic hope for, greater international cooperation?
It's definitely a challenge. But the report argues that it's more essential than ever.
Mm.
And they point to some successful examples of global cooperation,
Like what?
like the Montreal Protocol,
Okay.
that phased out, ozone-depleting substances.
So it's not just wishful thinking.
It's not.
There's actually a precedent
There is.
for this kind of collective action.
Yes, there is, so we can do it.
Right. And the report argues that we need to build on those successes
We do.
and find new ways to, like, incentivize cooperation,
Yes.
even when it's difficult.
It's hard, but we gotta do it.
Okay, so beyond strengthening institutions, what else is in there?
They also highlight the need to invest in resilience.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Okay, so think about strengthening infrastructure to withstand those extreme weather events.
Right, okay.
Improving disaster preparedness systems, and building more equitable and inclusive societies.
So basically, shoring up our defenses
Yeah.
and making sure everyone has a chance to thrive, even in the face of all these challenges.
Exactly.
And along with resilience,
Yes.
they also emphasize the importance of promoting sustainable development.
Yes, absolutely.
Ah, yes, the triple bottom line.
Yeah.
People, planet, profit.
That's it.
It's about finding ways to meet our current needs without compromising the ability of future generations
Right.
to meet their own needs.
Yes, it's thinking long term.
Right.
Recognizing that the choices we make today will have consequences.
For decades to come.
It's a big shift in mindset for sure,
It is.
but it seems essential if we want to create a future that's, worth living in.
I agree.
But all of this sounds like, massive effort
Yeah.
at the governmental or corporate level.
Yeah.
What about us regular folks? Like, what can we do as individuals to make a difference?
Well, the report doesn't, it doesn't let individuals off the hook.
Okay. got
They
it.
argue that even small changes in behavior
Yeah.
can have a ripple effect.
Like what? Think about reducing your carbon footprint,
Okay.
supporting sustainable businesses, engaging in, constructive dialogue with people who hold different viewpoints,
Yeah.
advocating for policies that promote resilience and sustainability.
So basically, being mindful of our choices
Yeah.
and using our voices to push for positive change.
That's it.
Well, there you have it, folks.
We did it.
A whirlwind tour of the World Economic Forum's Global Risks Report 2025.
It was a whirlwind.
I know about you,
Yeah.
but I'm feeling a mix of emotions right now.
Mm-hmm.
Concerned,
Yeah.
but also hopeful.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's understandable.
Right.
We confronted some pretty sobering realities.
Yeah.
But we also explored, potential solutions,
Yeah.
pathways for positive action.
And that's the key takeaway, right? We're
Yeah.
not powerless
No.
in the face of these challenges.
We are not.
We have the knowledge,
We do.
the tools, and the collective will to create a better future.
We can do it.
Let's get to work.
Let's do it.
All right, and on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
If these trends continue,
Yeah.
how might you personally be impacted
Yeah.
in a decade?
Think about it.
What steps can you take starting today
Yeah. What can you do?
to shape a more resilient future for yourself and your community? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Until next time,
See you next time.
stay curious and stay engaged.